Hi, you are watching SightsIn and this is Romesh Shikas. Please do subscribe to the channel for the HR news, for HR updates and conversations about our channels. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting subject. Should the companies ban the use of Chat GPT, BARD, and generative AI tools at the workplace? I'm sure you have gone through the news that a couple of companies like Apple, like Amazon, like Samsung, like Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, they have banned the use of ChatGPT for their employees. Why so? To understand better, today we have Mr. Nikhil Morade. Nikhil is the global head for the HR technology and HR shared services at Cipla. Welcome, Nikhil.
Hi.
As you know, that a couple of companies, as I named earlier, so these companies have banned the use of ChatGPT for their employees. What do you think? What are the reasons?
Sure, Ramesh. So I think if we want to kind of understand why these companies are banning it, we will need to first make a gauge of readiness of companies to start using ChatGPT. Now, if you are not ready for something, uh, and you start implementing and adopting a new piece of a technology, that's bound to create some problems. So to me, I think readiness is one area, because all of these things are new. Some of these companies are getting ready as we speak, and to avoid any potential issues as the companies are getting ready, and for this new or future way of working using a technology, they have momentarily put a pause, is the way I would want to kind of interpret this.
Of course, the readiness may be one of the reasons, but what are the other significant risks that these generative AIs possess for the companies?
So see, I think if these companies are not ready, it means that there are certain elements which needs to be thought through. This is not another piece of a technology which is available, plug, play, and you start getting business advantages out of it. So this particular piece of technology, if it requires readiness, it means that it is carrying some unknowns, or it is carrying some pieces of risk associated with it. Now, whether you call them as actual risk, perceived risk, that is something that every organization will have to take a stock. Now, in terms of a risk, so let's understand this new piece of generative AI and what kind of risk that they are kind of posing in front of the organizations right now. The first and the foremost, which slightly is kind of very popular right now with all of this generative technologies, is the risk towards the data privacy. Now, what happens is, if employees in the companies are going to use this tool, and this particular technology is going to learn from whatever information is going to be fed in, and there's no control in terms of what information an employee can put, then obviously lot of sensitive information in the organization, which is supposed to be very private within an organization or perhaps within a team, potentially can go outside the organization. This can now create a competitive disadvantage to a business. This can also probably create some issues towards IP. It can create some issues towards leakages of information ahead of time. So there is also good research associated around data privacy, that how many times that data privacy issue has come in this generative technologies. So one such research, which basically kind of polled in almost 10,000 odd folks, and the findings were literally 6% of employees out of that size of the poll had already shared sensitive information in the Chat GPT as they were using it. And another metric to it was 4% of employees, they would do this on a weekly basis. And these companies would have data privacy laws, they would have stringent info security frameworks in place. Still, intentionally, unintentionally, this privacy issue may happen. So data privacy is one such big risk. The second risk is what we also have to understand is that many a times the information that goes in and the way this technology starts processing the information and starts giving the output of that information, which is essentially how it gets trained, also creates more kind of a hallucination of the responses. It assumes certain things on its own. The information may be a fabricated information and passed off as a fact. So if all of that process is not very well taken care of, you may have a lot of potentially fabricated information lying around. So that is another second risk, which is typically categorized as a fabricated information or a hallucination issue that gets created. There's also potentially another issue which gets termed as deep fakes. So it's almost like with a malicious intent, someone can use some of these technologies to create a buzz, negative buzz in the organization, create a fake news in the organization. Using this, create some fake images in the organization, and then slightly tamper the brand or the goodwill of an organization on a large extent. So even that is a big risk that an organization will have to face if not properly kind of used and implemented. Like we were discussing earlier, there's another fourth risk of protecting your IPs, your copyrights, because these generative technologies are based on what they call as LLMs, right? Large language models. Now, all of these models basically are built on huge set of data, so that the pool of data is very huge. So that's a ready available information in an organization. Now, if potentially what may happen is in all of this, you may end up creating some bit of copyright issues as a lot of information gets passed on just to kind of train this information on violating your IPs and copyrights. And with such a bank of data available in this LLMs, there's also a potential issue of cyber security concerns, correct? Any such, so this is a kind of a ready availability stuff which you can hack in and then create a havoc for an organization, because that data is already available in certain models. So protecting that data, and if we are not able to protect that, the concerns around cybersecurity is also one of the big potential risks.
Yeah, Nikhil, but along with other points, you also talked about the data security, data breaches, data privacy. But if you look at the companies, so most of the companies like Amazon, like Samsung, like Accenture, like Deutsche Bank, so these all of the companies belong to the country where the countries are having the data privacy law. Then why these companies are afraid of about the data security?
Like Romesh, I said, it's all about the readiness of an organization. So if you're not ready, you may not want to, given this big risk associated from an organization, which kind of may potentially create issues towards the brand of an organization, the competitive advantage of an organization. If you're not ready, it's better to avoid or pause rather than to implement halfway. Now, they have also a set of other kind of an organizations. For example, again, I think with whatever is available in the public domain, on organizations like Morgan Stanley. Now, they had worked on this. They had made themselves ready. They had implemented their own private version of a Chat GPT, a private LLM. They would have built the whole skill set around kind of how to manage this, etc. Now, using all of this, I think since they were ready, they kind of take it to in another manner. Now they are seeking all the advantages of ChatGPT. The reason being they were able to mitigate the risk. Now, from an organization standpoint, while you would have a business advantages, unless you have mitigated all this risk, unless you are ready, you may not want to venture. That's not the the safest risk an organization would want to carry. So, so I think there are certain steps that an organization will have to take to be ready for this, and then the business benefits can come along post that.
And Nikhil, how do you see the risk of using Chat GPT in human resources?
So I think in extension to what we spoke, right? So I think first is the privacy issue, since human resources handle a lot of sensitive data of different employees, some set of policies, some set of confidential documents. So there is always that risk associated that knowingly, unknowingly, this information becomes more of public rather limited. So that risk gets associated. The second risk, again, I think what we have to understand more importantly from HR function standpoint is the fabricated information that we spoke about as a risk. If the training data and the way this generative AI would have given the output, and if that output is not is not watched or not reviewed, then potentially it may again create a problem, because again, from an HR standpoint, you may not want wrong set of data, wrong set of communications, or wrong set of information being passed in the organization. So that's second point. The third thing is, I think it also depends on how these models have been trained. But again, I think a lot of public information, a lot of research says that some of these models were also very biased in terms of racism, in terms of politics, in terms of gender. So even that in all the HR processes is very, very sensitive area. So unless and until the bias aspect of generative AI is watched to, it's mitigated in a proper manner, it's not very safe to implement it as is. And like we spoke, right? Since so HR would always have an access to a lot of employees' personal information, right? PII, so-called PII, and if that is not been well handled, and that information becomes kind of available outside, so that potentially creates another issue of privacy, etc., etc. So the risk, I mean, kind of, same risk kind of cascades back into HR.
So, Nikhil, you talked about some data privacy issues, some readiness, some data security issues, some cyber security issues. So, what do you think the companies should continue using the Chat GPT, or they should take a pause until they are not prepared?
Sure. So I think my clear view on this is that first you have to be ready, and then you have to onboard the journey. Without onboarding a journey, there is a potential risk, and that risk is very huge for an organization. Now, in terms of readiness, and again, I think every organization can be a forward-looking organization to start using or reaping the benefit of this particular technology. But in terms of readiness, so we'll have to understand that how an organization can be ready, because I think only certain elements can be handled through a technology of generative AI. Not everything can be solved at that end. Ultimately, that is built to operate in certain manner, correct? So we'll have to slightly think about readiness from what an organization can do. So first, I think is foremost and very important is building that whole culture about data security, data decision, how you use data in your day-to-day life, because that is very, very important. The second thing is again kind of you have to involve the right functions in the organization as part of due diligence process. So for example, your information IT, which is information technology team, that has to be looped in. Your legal teams have to be looped in. If your compliance teams have to be looped in all of that. So you can't do this in isolation. So there has to be a proper team who would kind of work together from all the standpoint, from policy standpoint, from legal standpoint, let's say from if you want to bring under the purview of data privacy, code of conduct, etc. standpoint. So these teams work together to define that framework for an organization. But having that framework is very important, that people don't misuse some of these things, and they're well educated about all of these things. So this is this is again second thing. The third thing, very important as well, is see, once you kind of even think of deploying or start using this generative AI, you will also need to think about some additional tools which will continue to monitor what kind of information is being fed into Chat GPT, what are the outputs, the logs of it, so that the whole thing is very well governed. It's not that you can leave it to between an employee and the tool. So there has to be a right tools as well sitting on all of this, which will continue to flag, any violations, any such issues on top of it. So that's also very important. So I think these are some of the readiness, Romesh. If you are ready, then you should onboard the journey.
Yeah, Nikhil, we tried to cover the entire subject. Why these companies are banning the use of Chat GPT and other generative AI tools for the employees. Anything important what we did not discuss would like to share?
So I think we covered all, and just at a cost of repeating. So while I think we hear that companies are banning this is a very this technology has a very deep potential. We all know, and I think people have already sensed how good the technology is. Now, the onus comes back on us that what we make the best use of this technology. And for that, I think, a lot of responsibility goes with us in terms of how you would ensure that you make the best use of this for an organization, because it's very clear that this technology has a lot of business advantages that it's going to bring in. So I would say that there is also that onus of responsibility that comes in of properly kind of implementing this technology.
So thank you so much, Nikhil, for joining the conversation and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Romesh. Take care.